Hello, and thank you for attending my thesis defense. I am Jessica Venegoni, and I will be defending my thesis on evaluating the effectiveness of self-compassion training with disability support staff. So, staff engagement is crucial when conducting research, especially in areas of disability support, because this population is responsible to provide services to intellectually disabled persons and their families. But they have reported feelings of low control in workplace decision making, while also working under contingencies that may dramatically affect burnout, retention, and stress. Prior research has determined that there has been minimal work conducted on the mental health and well-being of staff working with people with intellectual disabilities. However, there are accessible tools and practices such as self-compassion that demonstrate great success when applied by the person experiencing such issues. So, to restore autonomy for support staff, one option may be utilizing person-centered planning while conducting research, as well as in daily work, by having participants set their own behavioral goals rather than assigned by researchers, which is highlighted as an efficient and effective technique. Self-compassion. It's described as the process of acting the same way towards yourself as you would a friend or a loved one when you're facing a difficult time, when you fail, or you notice something you don't like about yourself. And in an interview with Dr. Kristen Neff, who is a lead researcher on self-compassion, she defined it within the Latin as to suffer with. And self-compassion is to be with ourselves as we suffer, with positive support and kindness, as well as mindfulness, while practicing that we are less likely to become overwhelmed with our thoughts and feelings, which can lead to other certain feelings such as depression and anxiety. Self-compassion, it involves three elements: self-kindness versus self-judgment, common humanity versus isolation, and thirdly, mindfulness versus over-identification. Research by Neff and colleagues provide a comprehensive study of the association between self-compassion and psychological well-being. Several research studies have found the practice of self-compassion to benefit university students. One study found that students enrolled in a semester-long seminar that engaged in self-compassionate behaviors were positively associated with achieving mastery goals for learning, and also negatively correlated with performance goals. So, meaning self-compassionate people have the motivation to achieve goals and grow towards their values for more innate reasons and not necessarily for social status or compliance. A study by Lee and Lee found that students engaged in self-compassionate behaviors have shown to decrease other behaviors related to fear of failure, which increases feelings of competence amongst students and lessens the impact of burnout, which can lead to depression in this certain population. Lastly, I want to address two studies by Neff and Germer, which evaluated the effectiveness of an 8-week mindful self-compassion program that was designed to train people to be more self-compassionate. So within study one, there were significant pre and post gains in self-compassion, mindfulness, and various well-being outcomes were also found. And then study two, those results found that compared to a control group, participants reported significantly larger increases in self-compassion, in mindfulness, and in well-being. So many employers expect good work without offering any support to their staff, or they might assign the problem to others to come in and fix. So employees need and expect sustainable and mentally healthy workplaces, which require taking on the real work of culture change. So employers must connect with what they say to what they put forward. A question that employers should answer is, what's your why when analyzing the cost benefits of choosing to offer mental health supports such as self-compassion? For many, therapeutic techniques and practices, those don't come naturally when experiencing a mental health emergency, for example. However, there are accessible tools and practices such as self-compassion, that show great success when applied by the person or organization. Many staff employed in, more specifically, disability support work with individuals who engage in severe and significant aggressive behaviors towards others. And this can cause negative emotional reactions amongst staff, as found by Noon and Hastings. So in previous research, when staff was presented with mindful-based technologies and workshops, that initial data suggested better acceptance of stressors present in the work environment. When self-compassion is practiced, people nurture themselves rather than criticize. So it's found to be more effective in the long run when increasing skills and acceptance towards adversities. So that may increase. This may be beneficial for both the employee and the company when practiced and trained at work. So by increasing profit for the company and profit in personal life. So if self-compassionate techniques are utilized throughout a workplace, retention may increase. So therefore, time, money, and training technologies can be saved. So engaging in behavioral strategies, which can help alleviate some of the upset brought about social issues, illnesses, or disorders, is encouraged, and it's often endorsed by practitioners. Effective practices, which can help alleviate some of the upset, are self-compassion and mindfulness. And so these practices engage the learner in present moment awareness, common humanity, and self-kindness, which in turn increase emotional resistance and stability. Behavior change in most of the research demonstrates that small behavior changes can lead to large improvements in an individual's life and environment. When utilizing behavior analytic interventions to target behavior change, direct and indirect observations are often used. Yet some sources indicate that indirect observations tend to generate less accurate data than directly collected data. So I want to reiterate, so practicing self-compassion is a direct behavior, and this is due to the engagement and completion of behaviors by the individual and being physically present and directly observing and monitoring their own behavior. And this is especially found in one area of self-compassion, which I have identified along with research found with NEF as mindfulness. So as previous research by Ruiz et al., they evaluated the effects of a one session act protocol in disrupting negative thinking, and the results demonstrated large effect sizes in all repeated negative thinking measures and in emotional symptoms, such as experiential avoidance, cognitive fusion, and value living. And this demonstrates the effectiveness of a non-invasive tool for ACT and related components. Lastly, prior research in the realm of self-compassion and ACT, those elements that self-compassion is a direct behavior and it can be observed within a single case experimental design, as previously mentioned. Technologies that can be utilized for training, which allow for adaptive, real-time, and real-world delivery of the intervention components and daily real-time processing, that's known as ecological momentary assessments, or EMAs. A systematic review conducted on the utilization of EMAs via smartphone to examine the effects on well-being. That review found that the use of smartphones to conduct EMAs was easier for both researchers and participants, and it allowed for more flexibility in the design. A previous study examined the effect of mindfulness training to increase psychological flexibility and academic performance in university students. And it was suggested within that research that future research should utilize an effective administration of EMA technologies. So some advantages of EMAs and research is minimizing recall bias, maximizing ecological validity, and allowing a study of microprocesses that influence behavior in the real world. So the present study, the current research supports the use of self-compassionate tools and techniques to improve work performance, happiness, job satisfaction, and to live a values-based life at work and home. Previous research findings suggest future research in self-compassion should include practical and comprehensible technologies for effective administration and collection, as well as applying training programs to areas such as the workplace. So this current study sought to explore the sought to examine several findings mentioned previously, but more focused on examining the effects of a 4-week self-compassion training course on engagement in self-compassionate behaviors and social validity scores with staff at disability support agencies. And this staff is simultaneously completing degree requirements for career advancement. The participants in the current study included 6 Caucasian females, and they were between the ages of 20 and 26, with a mean age of 21.16. These participants were enrolled at a public university in the Midwest, and they also identified as working at a disability support agency within the Midwest region, and they were all English speaking. The agencies for all participants provided some sort of service, such as language and cognition training, social and emotional instruction, and functional and adaptive interventions to children and their families, also while executing behavior science. 5 of the 6 participants were graduate students at the university. 4 of those graduate students were enrolled in the ABA behavior analysis program, and 1 graduate student was in the clinical psychology program. 1 participant was a senior level undergraduate psychology student, and the participants' average length of employment was between 6 and 8 months for an average of 7.16 months. And then lastly, the participants' consent came from reviewing a form that included a description of the right to withdraw at any time, as well as any risks and benefits of participating in the study. So methods. The dependent variable in the current study was the reported time of the practice self-compassionate behaviors related to the defined value of each of the participants. Participants' perceived social validity and self-compassion scores were collected and measured by utilizing a single case design via EMA on a mobile application called XPWell. All participants at the beginning met individually with the researcher on the same day for an introduction to the study, and on that same day they completed the ACT matrix once informed of what the study was. The ACT matrix session consisted of asking the participant to choose something in their life that has great importance to them. Next, once described, participants were instructed to list away thoughts and feelings, as well as physical things that take them away, as you can kind of see here on the matrix that I included on the slide. Lastly, participants were given 3 components of self-compassion as defined by Neff: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And then the researcher asked the participants to choose an individual towards behavior for each of those 3 areas related to their value. The stipulation was that it had to be measured in minutes. And as suggested by the researcher, to measure mindfulness, participants were encouraged to utilize meditation as a substitute. Yet, they did define what meditation was for them individually. Reported social validity was collected weekly from participants, and the primary outcome measures were the reported minutes of daily self-compassionate behavior. Participants were required to state the number of minutes practiced daily for the 3 defined self-compassion behaviors, even though they received training for only 1 a week. If participants did not engage in behavior, they were instructed to report 0 minutes next to the behavior. Email was utilized for contacting participants, and that was on a secure university system. Zoom was utilized to host meetings. The ACT matrix created by Polk and Schodendorf was utilized within the study. Participants were asked to download XPWell, which is that application for their mobile device, which allows for EMAs to be delivered via a phone app. In the current study, XPWell was used to create 4 pieces of training related to the areas of self-compassion. Each participant was randomly assigned an XPWell code for the intervention by a generic number generator. The daily report was created first, and then the weekly materials were created by adding in directions and materials, such as training videos that were created prior. The training was assembled on Microsoft PowerPoint, And each of the 4 videos after recording were uploaded to YouTube. And those links were copied and inserted into XBWell. Each of the trainings included what the topic of the week was, unique ways of engagement for the behavior, and then the importance behind the weekly topic. Once all materials were entered into XBWell, a monthly calendar was created by a drag and drop insert. And then so the researcher could see each day what was being conducted for participants, what was being added for participants. So this study also utilized a combination of all 3 topics for the 4th and final week. The 4th week of materials employed the definitions of each of the 3 self-compassion areas, as well as any relevant information from each of the 3 areas determined by researchers, and how they could be used together holistically. Participants were to report on set social validity measures on a scale of 1 to 5 with 2 questions, and also to complete the self-compassion survey. The self-compassion survey utilized in the study was the full version, so 26 questions, and participants were to rate how they genuinely acted towards themselves with each question on a scale of 1 to 5. The social validity measure was replicated from a previously mentioned study and included 2 multiple choice and 2 short answer questions. And data was examined on Microsoft Excel and transferred weekly to spreadsheets every Monday morning. When data was transferred, if responses were not recorded for some, the researcher would contact the participant via email, asking them to report their data within 24 hours to the researcher. Otherwise, their weekly data would not be collected, and it would be counted as 0. The current study utilized a reversal design that involved 3 intervention elements. So each phase of the intervention introduced one of the 3 elements of self-compassion, while one element remained in baseline and the other was withdrawn, where each element targeted a specific behavior of 3 possible behaviors, followed by a combination intervention phase for all 3 elements. So that would be phase 4. Baseline data was collected for a week. Prior to starting daily collection, the survey for self-compassion was administered, as well as at the conclusion of baseline. Participants were not sent reminders at the beginning of the day at this stage of the study, but they were notified daily by XBWell to report their daily data in minutes for all 3 areas of self-compassion. The start of baseline collection was in mid-April and it went through mid-May, which happened to be during finals week for the university. Each week of the study was replicated in XBWell to model the same layout for each participant, but the weekly training differed depending on the assigned group. So group 1's trainings were assigned in order. So meditation, common humanity, and self-kindness, as well as that last week of training combination. Group 2, common humanity, self-kindness, and meditation, with the 4th week being combination. And then group 3, self-kindness, meditation, and common humanity, as well with that combination for the last week. All groups had the same instructed training for the 4th and final week. Each training was administered on Monday mornings, and it was to appear at 7 a.m. And then participants would receive a reminder in the morning at 8 a.m. to practice their self-compassionate behaviors, although not defined in the reminder as to what that behavior was. The weekly trainings on XBWell started with directions on how to complete the training, and then the expectations of the week, and then following with a link to the YouTube video for the actual training, and then instructions following completion. Every day at 6, participants would receive a reminder from XBWell at night to indicate to input their daily behavior in minutes, and they had until 11:59 p.m. And these times were determined best just due to center hours, as well as previous research showing that well-being can be influenced by time and day. So this is a better kind of overview of what exactly was expected within each week. So baseline Within the baseline phase of the study, there were no existing interventions, but participants were asked to report daily engagement with self-compassionate behaviors, but there was no training. And then intervention phase 1, the intervention training was introduced for behavior 1, whatever that meant for the participants as they were assigned. Participant 1 and 2 received training for meditation, where participant 3 and 4 only received training for common humanity. And then both of the other behaviors remained in baseline. Intervention phase 2, participants only received training related to behavior 2, while the other behavior that they previously received was withdrawn, and the third behavior was still in baseline. During phase 3, the intervention was withdrawn for behavior 2, and participants were introduced to only behavior 3. So behavior 1 and 2 were withdrawn, behavior 3 was put forth. And then intervention phase 4. So during the fourth intervention, or during the fourth phase of the intervention, a combination of behavior 1, 2, and 3 were introduced to all participants. Participant 1, 2, 3, and 4 all received the same training during this phase of the intervention. This training involved meditation, self-kindness, and common humanity behaviors. So data analysis, the data was analyzed by utilizing Microsoft Excel, and that data was exported to Excel from XBWell. Graphs were created in Excel, and the percent exceeding the median was also determined. That's because it was one of the most, it's been defined as one of the most used measures of effectiveness for single case designs. So as criteria for interpretation, 70 to 90% suggest a moderate effect, which is what we found for all participants. Of the 6 participants in the study, 4 met criteria and 2 no longer reported. So that meant that they were not included in the final data analysis. Participant 5 and 6 did not complete the study. As found in other research, attrition in this area of study is difficult due to the nature of the work and the need for participation daily. So these graphs demonstrate a display of the participants' daily reported minutes of engagement. For participant 1 and 2, the order of their training went meditation, common humanity, self-kindness, and then participant 3 and 4 engaged in common humanity, self-kindness, and meditation before that fourth and final combination. So the percent exceeding the median, or the PEM, calculated for each of the participant scores, and it was demonstrated a moderate effect size, as I previously mentioned. So when compared to the average median score of the 4 baselines, the PEM calculation had an average of 84%, but ranging from 75 to 89%. So individually, with individual baselines, participant 1, their PEM score demonstrated a moderate increase in self-compassionate behaviors compared at baseline at 78%. So they had a moderate effect size. Participant 2 demonstrated a moderate increase in self-compassionate behaviors compared to baseline at 82%, which indicated a moderate effect. Same for participant 3, they were at 78% compared to the group analysis of 75. And then participant 4 had the lowest effect size at 71%, yet still demonstrating a small moderate effect size. So this right here is a graphical display. The first graph is a representation of participant 1, and then so it goes participant 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for participant 1 during baseline, common humanity and meditation behaviors were reported. So during the first week of intervention, when meditation was the target behavior, it was reported as 0 minutes for each day. However, self-kindness and common humanity behaviors were reported. During the second week, the week of common humanity was actually practiced for an average of 24 minutes a day. Self-kindness and meditation were reported during this week, with an average of 1.4 minutes a day for meditation and 5.14 minutes a day for self-kindness. During the third week, the week of self-kindness, the target behavior was reported at an average of 4.28 minutes a day. And then during the last and final week, week 4, engagement in all 3 behaviors had an average of 12.04 minutes reported. However, to be noted, 0 minutes reported with mindfulness. The second graph is a representation of participant 2's report for daily report of behaviors. During baseline, common humanity was the only thing reported with 0.83 minutes of engagement. During the first week of intervention, meditation was the target behavior, and it was reported on an average of 4.28 minutes a day. But common humanity behaviors were also reported at 13.57 minutes. During the second week, the week of common humanity, that was practiced for an average of 26.42 minutes a day. Self-kindness had 0 minutes on average, and meditation was reported once for 5 minutes. The third week, the week of self-kindness, that target behavior was reported at an average of 1.42 minutes a day, where common humanity was reported for 7.14 minutes a day. And during that final week, week 4, engagement in all 3 behaviors had an average of 5.23 minutes reported. 0 minutes reported with mindfulness, 0 minutes with self-kindness, but an average of 15.71 for common humanity. The third graph in the bottom left is a representation of participant 3 of their daily data. So during baseline, common humanity was reported with 4.16 minutes of average engagement, 2 minutes of self-kindness on average, and 0 for meditation. The first week of intervention, common humanity was the target behavior, and it was reported as an average of 20.71 minutes. During the second week, the week of self-kindness was practiced for an average of 12.85 minutes a day. During the third week, the week of meditation, the target behavior, meditation, was reported at an average of 8.71 minutes a day, yet common humanity was reported at 21.42 minutes a day. And during the final week, week 4, which is engagement of all 3 behaviors, there was an average of 9.61 minutes reported, with 7.14 minutes reported of mindfulness and an average of 11.42 minutes for self-kindness. The fourth graph is a representation of participant 4, and during baseline, common humanity behaviors were reported for 31.16 minutes, and also 5 minutes of self-kindness and 3 minutes of meditation. The first week of the intervention, where common humanity was the target behavior, it was reported on an average of 22 minutes a day. During the second week, the week of self-kindness, that was practiced for an average of 2.14 minutes a day. During the third week, the week of meditation, that was reported at an average of 3 minutes a day on average. And then the fourth week, the combination, all 3 behaviors had an average of 8.76 minutes reported. Psychologically, participants rated the trained self-compassionate measures as supporting and improving their well-being. Participant 1 reported an average of a 3.2 on a scale of 1 to 5, with feeling supported psychologically by engaging in self-compassion training. Participant 2 reported an average of 4.2 on reporting perceived psychological support related to weekly trainings. Participant 3 reported an average of 4. Participant 4 reported an average score of 2.6. And then this here also demonstrates the effect of self-compassion trainings with perceived work well-being. Participant 1 on a scale of 1 through 5 had an average of 2.8. Participant 2 had an average of 4. Participant 3 had an average of 3.8. And participant 4 reported an average of 2.6. This demonstrates that the data collection worked and there was some behavior change, but we need to actively listen to consumers on how to improve. The data suggest, going into implications, that there was a small change in participation with self-compassionate behaviors during training, and participants positively reported the effects of training on both psychological and work well-being. The intervention appeared to be effective for 2 of the 4 participants, more specifically participant 3 and 4. For these participants, common humanity was practiced throughout all of the weeks with a total average of 12.47 minutes, participant 3 and 26.44 for participant 4. Both participants practiced mindfulness the least. During the target week for self-kindness, participant 3 engaged in the target behavior, and participant 4 also engaged in that. And lastly, during the target week for mindful and meditative behavior, they engaged the least with. And the multiple choice social validity data indicates that as training continued, both perceived psychological and work performance support increased, although it was low. So in a field such as disability support, where technicians display compassion towards their clients, it can be difficult for some to replicate it within themselves, as shown even within this current study. This could be due to possible psychological rigidity or flexibility, as noted by Hayes. And this can also be assumed from the social validity reports, which multiple participants had suggestions of lack of perceived time, effort, or capability. So when trying to understand self-compassion in similar trainings, behavior analysts need to scale out to a wider practice of radical behaviorism, as defined by Skinner. It is potentially the environment that the person is in, and if it isn't supportive of the desired behavior change, then it can be difficult for the behavior to change in an environment that's not supportive for it. So moving on to limitations, although the findings indicated low to moderate success in the implementation of self-compassion training with support staff, they can't be generalized, and this is due to the small sample size. The number of participants was limited, and they enrolled within a university and then within certain departments, and also being identified as working in a disability support center, so very narrow selection of participants. And then a possible limitation that needs to be considered is within the research design. And the design utilized in the current study needed reversal effects, but it was not apparent that it happened within this study. The functional relationship between the target behavior within each intervention phase and training seemed to be slightly deficient among participants. A possible cause could be due to the irreversibility of behavior, meaning that once you learn something, such as a self-compassion technique, it's kind of hard to unlearn. So when evaluating skill building interventions like these, a multiple baseline design or a component analysis may have been more effective to utilize for a more efficient approach. Participants' workplaces also were not involved in the study, so some of those environments may have not been supportive. As previously discussed, that quote by Skinner, those surrounding contingencies of the individual's environments, they were not examined within this study, but they did have one environmental contingency in common, which was school. Participants reported that the notifications from XBWell, they were ignored when sent at times. So it indicates that those reminders were not reinforcing for participants. So prior to and after conducting the study, no examinations of psychological flexibility were administered, which could have affected many areas of the study, such as attrition and practice of behaviors, maybe due to potential rigidity as well, psychological rigidity. Future research should examine the effects of those surrounding environmental contingencies, as well examine personal contingencies experienced by the participant, such as psychological flexibility, as I just mentioned. Future research should consider the application of self-compassion training to other diverse populations, as noted in a previous study by Belisle et al. In 2022. Within the current study, we could also try to apply similar trainings to students maybe in grade school or on academic probation or so on and so forth. As mentioned previously, part of the current study was conducted during the finals week of the university, so that could have an influence on participants' responses. So future research should either conduct a study maybe at the beginning of a semester or during breaks to maybe eliminate any perceived stress or responsibilities. as well as attrition. And then lastly, the current study did utilize some personalization throughout, such as during the ACT matrix, for example, but also tailoring the EMA content, that ecological momentary assessment content, to each participant could also help with higher user satisfaction when utilized. And that's also noted in a previous study. So lastly, the conclusion. So the results of the present study and others build onto a growing body of research which suggests that self-compassion, when implemented, it might be under the influence of not only personal contingencies, but broader environmental contingencies. The present research contributes to a piece of the initial steps towards understanding the practice of self-compassion and the areas of practice that maybe hold more influence than others. And then, as previously noted, when self-compassion is practiced and people nurture themselves rather than criticize, it is found to be more effective in the long run when learning skills, and accepting adversities may increase. The current research supports the use of compassionate mindfulness-based techniques to support well-being of students and staff. And then lastly, the current study explored and examined the effects of a 4-week self-compassion training course on engagement and self-compassionate behaviors with staff at a disability support agency. And the findings support the use of such technologies within this population. Thank you for attending my thesis defense. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions or any previous discussion, please just add those in the comments. I appreciate it.